does work. Works for me. And that is that fapping, be it to porn or not, you can fap without porn, and it's perfectly biblical. The only thing that's bothersome in the Bible is sexual immorality. That doesn't mean you don't perform sex. It's that sexual immorality means that when you perform sex, that it's not something that's immoral. That you're sticking that penis somewhere where it doesn't belong, or you're taking it from something that isn't a penis or something. Maybe that's the sexual immorality that's talked about there. Maybe it's something much deeper, kind of like some of the other kinds of ideas in the Bible that it says never do, like don't eat bats and don't fix a baby goat in its mother's milk, because the idea is perverse. You don't do things like that. It's what's really saying is just don't seek perversity, because by doing that, you're basically ruining the minds of either yourself or your children or their children. You're somewhere down the way you're going to ruin a whole generation as a result of just a simple idea you thought that was simple and wasn't going to hurt anyone. Maybe you thought it was funny, to do something like that. But it's the idea is to keep things simple for everybody and keep things um, keep people from investing too much emotion and concern into things so that they're by default happy. You know, you want everybody to be happy. Don't in, don't encourage ideas that will make people unhappy. However, I'll point out that when you get to my age and you start to fap, I mean, when you get to the age of puberty and you start to fap, because you will, um, because it's pleasurable what happens. I wasn't ready for it. Whenever it hit me, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to make sense of it. And my behavior completely changed overnight. It was just like I started realizing that women, that girls, the females had a value to them that was extra to what it was like a month ago. And a month ago, I didn't feel anything for them. A month later, I hit puberty. I'm like feeling like, wow, these people are drugs. That I didn't even know what a drug was. That was the start of my addiction. And so I would see somebody, I would be very attracted to them, and I would be so compelled that night to whack off to the idea of doing something with them, being part of their lives. I would whack off to that. But then that turned to me looking for images that would satisfy that. And it started with some, simple things like going through Sears catalogs, looking at women in brasiers, and then fapping off to that. And then you end up fapping off to. My mom had these magazines filled with women in crochet, and the crochet models of that time, um, they decided not to put bras on them. They were naked underneath, and I could see their nakedness, and in that became pornography to me. It was because I didn't have access to it that I started finding it. I started looking for it, and then there was a point in my life where I started stealing pornography because I couldn't buy it because I was underage. So I went out and I would steal it, and it was available on the shelves. So the children could access it because I was like 16. I could access 18-year-old porn off the shelf, so I could go and just rip off a magazine, look at it, then stick it in my sock and walk away. And I did that many times. I mean, it was wrong, but whenever you're a kid and you have such a desire to for something as I did, stealing it didn't feel wrong to me at the time. and people who do porn, and it's pretty much the feeling that there's really, you know, there's just going to be stealing anyhow, because you want it so much that, and you don't see how a picture is going to not benefit somebody's bottom line of, it's kind of like $5. Who's going to miss $5? You know, or even less, because it's really just the production cost is $2 or $3, and you reason it that way, but you don't realize that you might actually be hurting somebody in the process. And these days, when I give money to people who did pornography, it's because I knew that there was a time whenever I stole it, and there really is no way I could compensate for it that way. And I have to understand that the people that were behind that were doing it because they were trying to get themselves out of poverty. They were trying to get themselves out of bad situations. And the people who make this stuff, they, in their youth, were abused by people all the time. And all it took was for them to say, would I rather be abused, or would I rather take what is already happening to me, that my body is already being exploited, and just exploiting it myself, getting money off of it, than going and getting myself out of the situation. And there are people who say, how you would change such things from happening. I say, don't take it to heart. You might be that God's in that, getting them through it, but it's not something for you to be involved with, um, unless you think you have the capacity to overcome the concern, just to sacrifice and get involved with these people and maybe make them into something that they desire to be, and that is real people, not people that are involved with the perversity. Some of them are really kind of screwed up, you know, so to say. But by being involved with them, then maybe they will take on the attributes of being normal, even if they've got some craziness. Maybe they're able to disown all the stuff that would people would perceive as being crazy. But maybe even involved with that, and then people say that you're sane, but you're making friends with somebody who's crazy and maybe perverse. Maybe other people who are in that situation will start to befriend you, and then they have the intent to become a better person, whereas the person you're originally involved with doesn't have the capacity to even go there because they are crazy. See what I'm saying? And so you have to make yourself available to people, and you're going to make yourself available in all sorts of situations where other people wouldn't. You're filling a hole that's there for you to fill out. You may look like Dennis Rodman to the rest of the world, but to those people, you are Jesus. You're Jesus in their wake, or you know in the place where they didn't expect to find Jesus. They found Jesus, and it was in you that they found Jesus. And so you just have to be there, and you can't really be concerned too much with whether you know whether you're doing it right or wrong. That Jesus is gonna come through you to them by being with them and involved with them, and that's necessary, because otherwise there wouldn't be anybody there, and those people would be crazy without any passable chance of becoming um, important to or even important to themselves, because they get depressed and they think to themselves and say, man, I must be a really bad person because I commit what's obviously a sin, and I do it anyhow, and I do it for money, but I'm doing it to survive. I'm not doing it because I want to deceive people, or to ruin people. I'm doing it because I'm trying to get out of a bad situation. And they're the only one that's seen that. The rest of the world's seen somebody who's obviously evil and perverse. But but God's in there saying, I know what you're feeling, I know where you're at, I'm ready to get you out of this because this is what you feel. And we're going to do it, but you're not going to realize that I'm here doing this. And you'll see it later on. You'll be able to look back and see God was that I was involved with you and I was getting you through this because that was your desire. It's what's your desire and what you're trying to do with your life that matters. Um, is what really matters. It's not where you are and what you are and how people perceive you that matters. It's where you want to go with it. Okay, what you're trying to do with it, where you're trying to get to in life, from where you are, and when you're in poverty, there's so many doors out, and um, a lot of those would be cut off to you because of the way the world perceives good and bad. You might actually go out and steal things in order to see that you did bad, but then you're able to find the good things that you can do to get out of such situations. But that was the only opportunity you thought that existed, and that's what you showed up for. It's not that there's something wrong with you, it's just that you had to go through the learning experience. And that learning experience involved maybe getting involved, uh, going into jail, but then, or maybe getting involved with somebody who's good, and then coming to realization that you were doing bad all along, and now you have to kind of revert some of that, or revert all of that, in order to feel good about yourself. I didn't feel so bad about stealing porn from magazine stores. And, now I kind of feel bad, but what I was really doing was I was saying that there wasn't anybody there to communicate to me what this stuff was. There was nobody that was going to communicate to me what it was that was necessarily wrong or right with it. And there certainly wasn't the people that I desired to be involved with, or the potential of being able to curb the appetite, because I had such an appetite, and it was really, I was using porn to compensate for experiences I've had previous to being involved with porn. And it was kind of like I was um it was kind of like I was trying to balance out things that happened in my life that people around me were not really aware that was going to cause more trouble for me. And so I used porn to kind of answer the need that wasn't being met in my life. And the sad thing is I still have it. But to me, it's not so sad because I've done so much of it that the perversity of the acts and all the stuff that I've seen, um, it's like it doesn't even matter to me that it's perverse anymore. It's that what I'm thinking in my mind is this person is beautiful, that person is beautiful. They are doing something awful, but maybe somewhere down the road they're going to become a better person. They're going to become better people. And this stuff won't matter to them later on. There are things that are going to happen in their lives, like with people that do VR porn. They're going to be, they're going to have children or grandchildren who they want to have a normal relationship with, but once those kids hit puberty, are going to turn to the VR porn that their grandma produced, and they're going to fall sexually in love with their grandma, and their grandma's going to feel really kind of, um, really kind of weird whenever that stuff happens, and it's just the cost of porn, or the cost of creating such stuff, is that you're going to have a relationship with someone on a different level, and you won't want it, you know, because it's perverse, and you'll have to convince them that The person you were whenever that stuff was created is a different person than you are now, and the kind of relationship that you want to have with them isn't what that person, and they will they will understand you. They'll understand that that was a different person, and you could very easily say that I'm not that person, and that's probably the reason that as we age, our bodies get old, we become ugly. We're able to separate ourselves from our youthful selves, and they will see those people as a different person than the person you are now, who is somebody who's gotten away from that. You know, if you were the same person from that point on, and you were still trying to look like that person, that would be more of a problem. That the perversity that would still, you would start to wonder, okay, now I'm probably going to have problems having a relationship of being a grandmother to somebody who is now addicted to the porn that I created. That's the scary thing about pornography for people that create porn is that and it may be the case that they think about this stuff ahead of time and think there's no way I'm ever going to have grandchildren because I don't want to have this experience. What I say is I say just let it happen. Shoot for what it is that you want in life. Go for it. If things like that happen, let them happen and try to reason through it in some way so that it doesn't sound so perverse because you can't compensate for perversity in the past. All you can, I mean, there's some crazy stories out there people have been through, and I mean, and how do you compensate for such stuff? I mean, when you start to become a normal person after having been through some very perverse stuff, how do you become a normal person? You become a normal person because you're trying to be normal. You're not trying to be perverse. You come to the realization that there was perversity and that there's no need for it now. Um, the how porn gets to be perverse is they come to the realization that there are certain markets of things that people like, certain vices, and then they shoot for those vices, and the people that are involved with them don't have the vices, but they pretend to have the vices, and then it creates this content, and then other people watch that content and get off to it, and the person who were eventually involved with it are like looking at those people and saying, "You guys are stupid." The reason I did that is because I was trying to make money and I was trying to survive. It wasn't because I actually felt the way you felt about it. I was just filling a gap in the market where there was a need. I was servicing that need. Okay, and that's the way these porn stars think about guys who send them pictures of their cocks. You know, they're going to say, if you want to send pictures of your cocks to me, you better put $50 in each picture that comes to me, and I will look at your cocks. Of course, they're saying, and I'll throw the picture of the cock away, and I'll take the $50. Thank you very much. You know, but the guys who send it, they're just completely. They don't know that how the people are going to take it. You know, if it's one way or another, they may feel cheated if that happens. But I would say you feel cheated whenever somebody just takes your money and doesn't care one iota what you think. I mean, they don't want to have a relationship with you. What they want to have is a relationship with the money. You're providing the money to be fooled, and that's the porn industry. That's that's the sad part of the porn industry is that a lot of it is is constructed. It's a fallacy. It's a constructed fallacy. And it took me years, it took me decades to realize that the stuff I saw in this porn was not real. And I will tell people that even now I'm still attracted to this stuff, but I know it's not real. For instance, I don't believe there is a person on the planet of the Earth that enjoys giving head, and I don't. And the guys who get head, the only thing I can imagine that they're feeling that gives them pleasure is that there's someone willing to give them head to make them feel pleasure. Because the act, I've had it, and I've come to the realization. When I had it, I was just like, there's nothing special about this. It doesn't feel all that great. It's what you're seeing, is what's happening, and is what's going through your mind that is the thing that affects it. And so whenever I see it in VR, or I see VR porn, where it looks like there's something down around my waist of some guy's dick, and they're giving him head, I'm sitting there thinking, this is not very interesting, guys. You know what? The worst thing for me in VR porn is the distance of the woman's face to my own. The further their face is away from my own face, the less value it has to me. And until they realize that, they're going to keep doing the same crap they do in the 2D porn format. The best thing they could ever do is to bring their face forward to mine, and for us to see eye to eye, and then whenever they're experiencing something, even if I can't see it, all I see is the satisfaction in their face. I get off on the satisfaction in their face, to look at their pretty face and to look at all the emotion going through their eyes and into their mouth. They don't have to even say anything. That there's so much beauty in that feeling, in that moment, to me, that gets me through the day. It'll get me through the day. um, it is like a drug to see that. And that's more what I would say a lot of fappers connect with, is the emotion and the things that they cannot experience themselves, because there's nobody as beautiful as you are, the pornographer, the porn star, as beautiful as you are. They never get that direct connection to anybody that's that beautiful, that will give them that feeling, because they get to see something that they will never see in their, you know, or never experience in their life, or never believe they could ever experience in their life, because nobody would give them the capacity to have access to it. And you're providing that access, and that's beautiful, because it gives them an imagination. It causes them to imagine there's a possible future where they get to be with someone who is beautiful. It may not be a possibility, but at least it makes it possible for them to get through the things that they're having to go through in order to have something beautiful in their life. And it may start with pornography. There are people in the world that will vilify pornography, take it away from people who are just looking for something, some excuse to live life. And you got to let them have it. You know, you can't take it away from you. Just let them have it. They'll have it. And eventually they'll get around it, and they'll find something that's closer to what you think is good. Maybe they don't, but you just need to let them have whatever it is that they find that's happy. You know, because can you imagine God's looking at us and seeing all the stuff that we do that's wrong? And God would like to clean our faces and clean us up and say, no, this is what you really want. It's very difficult. He's not going to do that. God's going to do what's it's going to do, and all that other stuff. Eventually, you'll get out of it. You get away from it. Maybe you won't, but God's going to use you. God's is going to let you have the things that make you feel good. The only important thing is that God has, and it has need for, is that you start that you realize that God's there, that God's involved, and God's involved in everything you do, even whenever you want to have nothing to do with God. God is going to use you. So so you're going to have a very hard time to try to piss off God, just as it would be very hard for you to piss off your parents, who would love you eternally if you had such parents. There are parents that are none such, but there are parents who, no matter what kind of perverse, stupid stuff you do, and you do this just really just to test the limits of their love, will love you regardless. You know, and that's the challenge of a parent, is the capacity to love regardless of what the child does. To love them because they are, because of, and the parent is really looking at the child, for other things that the child just doesn't have the capacity to change, such as their birth. The beauty of their birth is enough to get that parent through life, despite whatever perverse, stupid, and evil stuff the child could do. The parents, I mean, I'm sure the parents of serial killers don't even let their mind go in the area which would destroy them. In their mind, they see their daughter and their son, the one that was born to them, and they think about the time that they were created, and they disregard all the stuff that they did after. All the bad behavior, they just disregard it, and all they see is the baby that was born to them. And the whole world will come back to them and say, can't you see that they became a serial killer? That doesn't matter to them. To them, what matters is what happened before all of that, the beauty that they saw in the persons that they bore. And there's not a damn thing you can do to change that for them. There's some that might even be strong enough to be able to see past that their child is a psychopath, that has no capacity to feel for them as a parent, or feel for anything for anybody but themselves, but are still able to love them regardless. And that's kind of what Jesus asks us to do, is to be able to care for people who have no capacity to reciprocate, to give back. And so whether it's somebody who's an invalid, or somebody who, has, who's retarded, or just doesn't have the capacity to give verbal communication, say thank you. Some child who doesn't have any cognitive ability. Your life becomes richer by taking care of them. It's the same thing for somebody who has a child that becomes a serial killer. Is that they feel blessed to have had a child, and it may not matter anything to them that child went on to kill people. That wasn't their problem. That was the child. That was the result of something that happened to the child, or that the child came in contact with. They might internalize it if they were beating their children, for sure. But there are people called schizophrenics, and there are people that undergo things like multiple personality disorder, and those things are attributes of what the neural pathways inside of a person can do to compensate and adapt to really, trying times. And there are children who, when they got abused, developed multiple personalities, and the personalities took the abuse, and the children themselves were able to retain themselves, because when abuse occurred, the personality saved them from the abuse. And so they knew the abuse was happening, but they weren't there experiencing, feeling it. It was the personality that took it. Such things, I don't know if that stuff is true. That I've heard of stories like that. It sounds plausible, but I don't know if it's true, and it's really hard for my brain to get around the idea that your brain could construct a persona that would take the abuse that you couldn't imagine. I mean, that you couldn't take yourself. And you wonder, like if you're a psychopath that gets abused as a kid because your parents don't understand that your psychopathy and don't know how to compensate for it, they abuse you. That causes you to become a serial killer, and then later on you are in jail, and you're bothered by the fact that you've been imprisoned, and you don't feel any remorse or anything. But for the parent, they need to understand that that's the case with a psychopath. That they're never going to see what was wrong with what they did. That's not going to come about. They need to be able to love that person regardless. And it's possible that the parent and the people who it was really just a test of their ability to get through such terrible times. And maybe in that become them, all the people involved might have become, say, social workers that are able to go to get to the parents that are about to abuse their children, to let them know that child there is not like you. That child is got something going on with them that you need to understand could ruin people in the future. And what you need to do is understand their behavior and see it through their eyes, what's going on, and then you need to figure out some way of leveraging them away from that by giving them other things, giving them incentives to do good. And so you'd say, I would pay you $15 for every month that you do not go and do something like um, throw the fish to the cat, or I don't know what just happened. My power went out. My power went out. Yeah, I know. I saw that. It makes sense to me now. the minute the the minute I start to talk about solutions for parents that have serial killers, and I try to come up with a solution, my mic falls out, and I'm sure God was saying, um, I could foresee you down the road getting on the subject. That's the reason why all this previous crap happens, so that your battery would run out just whenever you start to say something stupid, you know. And I mean, God has that capacity to foresee all possible futures. That's one of my beliefs. There are people that say he's outside of time. I think it's much easier for a person to think that God has the capacity to see all possible futures. And, it's hard for us to understand that capacity. But if if we believe that God created us, we will understand that God sees all the inner systems and all the courses that they would take and all the interactions of all the other things in the world. And you'd probably say, well, how is that possible? And talk to a mathematician, talk about recursive systems, recursive functions. If God has the capacity to recurse, to go in and use God's understanding and abilities within systems within systems within systems, and extend God's self to all those things, then it would be very easy to do such things. It would not be easy for us. It'd be very easy for God to see, you know. It's hard for us to understand that unless you've had mathematics or unless you've done computer programming, because the way you solve problems in math is by calling functions that are able to solve a problem. And then if they have a problem that that function can't adequately fix, you call a different function that can fix that problem, and the result of that might also be another problem. And so you put little tests in there and say, well, if the problem looks like this, you apply that function. If the problem looks like this, you apply this function. And this is actually, if you ever look into a very good example and a very simple example of applied recursive functions, is actually computer programming languages, where you'll have a function that will rip apart syntax for statements and for operations and for for mathematical operations with inside of statements, with inside of lists of statements, with inside of procedure calls. All of those require, in order to parse them, you do it recursively. You do the parsing recursively, and the recursion deals with the complexity that you can't possibly do if you were to do it iteratively. If you do it recursively, it's so much easier to parse things, computer languages, recursively than it is to do it iteratively. Even if the recursion gets reduced to iterative steps, the language is going to do that for you that you're using, so that you don't have to think about it. So you can write a computer language in any computer language you want. You can make your own computer language, and you can solve that problem by doing recursive parsing of the text, and you end up turning what was source code into a kind of a schema of data and various sorts of things. I'm talking to computer programmers now. This just flies over your head. Just let it fly, because I'm going to come back. But um, this is stuff I learned in computer science, was how to write computer languages. And once you understand how the computer language is parsed, and you can start to see all the cool stuff and really perverse stuff you can do with computer programming to get to solve problems, and your average person coming into it are going to be so confused by what you're doing that they can't make heads or tails of it. And you describing to them the reason why you were able to do all these things is because you knew these things about how the computer language is going to parse stuff. You really don't want to do that too much, because if you do, then somebody's going to surprise you down the way, and the assumptions you had about what the computer language was going to do in parsing your content and the operations you're doing will get substituted with something that doesn't do what you expect it to do, and you end up with bugs. This happens with libraries, where you'll use a library that somebody is implemented all the functions necessary to do the things you want to do, but they had the wrong assumptions about the API they were using, and it breaks whenever the API change, or when say Sony goes to the next version of the Sony PlayStation. The stuff in PlanetSide breaks because they were using libraries that made assumptions about the APIs that were wrong. That's where bugs come from. A good bit of the bugs that you experience in software comes from people making assumptions about how things work and being wrong about it. And the idea is that they were ignorant of how the system worked in the API, and they just did whatever works, and then they just prayed that it would break. And later on it does break, but they're not around, possibly because they've already passed away, or they've moved on and they've worked with other stuff and they've lost interest in this stuff. But the people that get it, that inherit it, are now being devalued by their boss for not being able to deal with this complexity that was not theirs to begin with. They don't have access to the source. They don't know what it's doing. They don't know how to fix it. The only thing it can do is augment it. To add stuff to the game, not change what's not working. And there's all sorts of things that can go wrong there too, like you're doing the wrong kind of business relationship with the people that are creating the executable, and they're negotiating with you that they can keep the source code. Never do that. when you're working on a project. Never let somebody say, I'm going to manage the source for you. You're going to get an executable and you're going to be buying the executable. Don't let them do that. If they do that, don't employ them. Don't give them money. Go to someplace else. If they do it, figure out if you end up doing that because you have no choice. Do it and then find a way to redo it. Have somebody else employ something that's and get the source code so that you don't succumb to that problem. Because the problem is that somewhere down the road, they're going to want a whole lot of money out of you, and you're not going to be able to make sense of paying them whenever your profits are not going to get you out of this mess. And your creditors are going to be down your throat because you weren't able to provide a product to service the need of the consumers because you were having to negotiate with somebody who was extorting money out of you through a business process that you had to try to create software that was going to you're trying to create a product, and they knew you were trying to create a product, but they were exploiting you and extorting money out of you in order to get you to in submission to them. And the best situation there is just either get out of it or just tell your creditors that we need to create another engine, and if we don't, then this is going to just end up really bad, and that you're not responsible for the outcome of this. That you're going to leave, and they're going to be up shit creek. Okay, so there is perversity in the world. You can compensate for it. The people who create it are not always to blame. That's what this whole talk was about. And God will work through all of that.